All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Michelle Benjamin. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Leasecake. We're here to talk about advanced lease negotiation. It's a very exciting topic. Before we get into the actual presentation and introducing the speakers, I'll do a few housekeeping items while people are joining. We are recording this, as always. We'll be sending it out afterwards. If you'd like to see the deck, we can share that also. But we also have an advanced lease negotiation guide that we'll be sending as a follow-up to everyone who registered. So expect that, and it's got all these details and more. So lots more information coming your way in case you missed something or want to go back and listen to it. If you have questions at any point, there's two ways to ask them. You can use the Q&A or the webinar chat, and we will keep an eye on both of those, try to answer them as they come in. And if not, we have a Q&A time slotted at the end, and we'll try to address them. So feel free to keep your questions coming. We love it when it's interactive, and we want to make sure everything's clear. So, all right, so here we are. This is Leasecake Live. This is our educational webinar series. Hopefully you've joined one of these webinars before. If not, welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your day. We are Leasecake. If you are a customer, you know us well. You probably know Christy and Heather also because they are working with our customers on a regular basis. But if you aren't familiar with us, we are a lease and location management platform. This is not a sales pitch. I'm not here to talk to you about our platform, but I will just let you know that it's one-stop shop to collect and organize all the dates, dollars, and documents for all your locations. So that's not just leases, it's contracts, it's franchise agreements, it's permits and warranties, anything you have for a location. Our platform keeps it all organized for you so you never risk missing a critical date again. So that's all I'm going to say about the platform. If you'd like to learn more about it later, we'd love to talk to you about it, but that's not why we're here. We're here to educate you. So let me introduce our lovely speakers. Heather Thomas is a senior real estate manager and Christy Beckman is a real estate manager. These are two of our in-house real estate experts. They know so much about leases. They spend a lot of time looking at them. I think probably all of their time looking at real estate documents. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
And we're going to get right into it. So we're here to talk about lease negotiation. We've got slides for all the different tips, and we're going to start off with something simple but amazing: building strong relationships. What do you have to say about that?
Thanks, Michelle. So I want to start with building strong relationships. This can be the foundation of your future negotiations with your landlord. And it has significant benefits for both sides. Landlords are people, and yes, some are sticklers more than others, and they know what they will and they won't budge on. And why that is because they budget and they forecast for the space. So when you're looking at a space, just know it's already been budgeted. They already have an idea what term they want, what rate they want, if they're going to give any allowance for improvements. So coming out with a strong but reasonable proposal for your initial lease is going to be setting the tone. And as we go through this deck and negotiation points, we're not just thinking about your initial negotiations, but your future negotiations for your renewals. So we're starting this with this slide because our overall theme is going to be just ask. Christy and I have talked about our prior experiences negotiating leases, and we both agree that many times if a tenant would have just asked, we probably would have worked with them on their request. So that's going to be our overall theme, just ask. And of course, that goes back to having a relationship with your landlord. This can benefit you both sides with longer tenancies. You'll feel comfortable and supported. You're more likely to stay. Your landlord is going to want fewer vacancies and a more stable shopping center or building. And they don't necessarily like turnover. Nobody wants to have a vacant space sitting there, and getting it back on the market costs time and money. Having better communication and being positive in your relationship is going to have a number of benefits for you. So when your landlord has a relationship with you, they're going to understand you and your business better. They're not going to be caught off guard when your renewal comes and you have a request, because they're already going to know your business and kind of what your needs are. So I think that's a really strong part of building that relationship is having a comfortable conversation when you go to ask for some things that you need for your space. It's also going to make your tenancy easier when it comes to resolving any kind of maintenance issues, and definitely we all know things come up in spaces, so it's just going to be to benefits on both sides. And it also lends to a more forgiving landlord. I think everyone experienced the pandemic and needing some grace. So having a good relationship with your landlord is important for those types of situations. Christy and I have seen a lot of amendments and modifications for COVID. So we know that that definitely took place, and that was a time that those relationships came into play. So investing in your landlord-tenant relationship is going to lead to overall benefit for both of you.
Yeah, and I think that across every webinar that we have a lot of our customers come and speak about their success stories, sharing their success stories, and building strong relationships is always a key to success. I'm sure every business owner here knows that. Can't hurt. And specifically regarding landlords, we've also heard that if you have a stronger relationship with your landlord, when they have a new space available, they'll generally come to the nicer tenants that they like. So it never hurts to be friendly with your landlords. So
Yep.
I've heard that from many other customers also. I agree. All right, next up, got a different kind of relationship with brokers.
Exactly. Another important relationship we feel, especially tenants and landlords should have, is with commercial real estate brokers. They have established relationships with landlords, property owners, and other industry professionals, providing access to a broader range of properties, including those that may not be publicly available. Brokers have an in-depth understanding of the local real estate market and can provide clients with industry trends, vacancy rates, and recent rent comparables. The information they provide can help you make an informed decision and narrow down your site selection to find the best space for your business needs. It's important to hire a broker who specializes in the type of commercial real estate you're dealing with. Commercial brokers often focus on specific sectors, such as office, industrial, or retail properties, and may represent either tenants or landlords. So make sure you select a broker who aligns with your property needs. It's always a good idea to interview multiple brokers thoroughly, just as you would any job candidate. It's important to choose someone you can trust, hold accountable, and who demonstrates expertise and commitment you need. I wanted to point out that in most cases, the property owner or leaseor pays the commission for the commercial lease, not the tenant. So it's extremely beneficial to tenants to take advantage and use a commercial broker.
Yep. All right. And it's just like my mortgage broker. You don't just go with the one that one person recommends to you. You should always interview more than one. I've heard that advice also. So
Absolutely.
know what your options are. All right, let's talk about rent abatement.
So rent abatement is the first kind of rent piece of the negotiation topics we're going to talk about today. And it's a common incentive that provides tenants with a period of free rent. During the abatement period, the tenant is not required to pay rent to occupy their space. Often, abatement periods take place over the first few months of the lease. Many landlords offer rent abatements because they want you to become their tenant and pay rent to them. Landlords are willing to give up a little bit of income at the beginning of the lease to make money over its entire length. Free rent always sweetens the deal for a tenant and defrays the cost of moving into the new space. We want to keep in mind that sometimes your landlord might expect something in return for your savings. It usually turns out that free rent isn't actually free. Sometimes the landlord might ask to charge you a higher base rent, or another option they might go with is to ask you to sign a longer term lease. We see typically it's common to add the rent abatement months to the end of the lease term. For instance, a 60-month lease with 4 months free rent can turn into a 64-month lease that the landlord still gets 5 years of income. This might fit your strategy and it might be a great deal for you, but it's still important to know that the owner on the other side of the negotiating table is getting something in return too. Keep in mind that even if you don't have to pay base rent during the abatement period, you still may be expected to pay expenses such as utilities and CAM to cover the cost of maintaining shared accesses during the rent abatement period.
All right.
Heather's going to talk about rent structures next.
Yes, so thank you, Christy. Negotiating rent structures is important for your cost management and budgeting and planning, as you know. This is where you're going to look at your business over the next 5 years, if say it's a 5-year term, and what rent increases are going to make sense for you, and your use and your space. Meaning, do you have a slow season? Are you in a location that's in high demand? Work with your landlord or broker who's representing you to represent what's going to work best for you. But of course, it's going to depend on the location. And again, is it a high demand location? When I talk about slow months or certain seasons where you're not getting the foot traffic, you may want to ask, as Chrissy mentioned, for some free rent or half rent built into your rent structure during those slow months. Look at the market, talk to your broker, find out the temperature of the market. Brokers know if landlords are out there giving free rent or not, depending on the market. So look at it. Is there low inventory, or is there more vacancy in the location you're looking at? How long has this space been sitting on the market? Has it been sitting there vacant a while? Is it a high demand shopping center? Everybody's trying to get in there. So those are the things you're going to want to look at. And again, engaging with a broker is going to help you answer some of those questions. If a landlord isn't giving rent abatements, ask for some early occupancy. Ask for 30 days to get in there, get set up with your FF&E, and before your rent starts, and get yourself started. Typically, rent increases are going to be anywhere from 2 to 5% annually, or 5 to 10% every 5 years. We see that more on the renewal end. But landlords are looking at the per square foot amount they're getting for the space, and they want to make sure that they're staying competitive in the market. So just keep in mind, the landlord's looking at the average per square foot that they're getting over the life of the lease. Again, you can ask your landlord to be creative. Just know that if you're going to ask for no rent bump in year 2, they're most likely going to make up for that somewhere else in the term. And if you're okay with that, because you're forecasting that at the end of your 5 years, you're going to be in better shape and have more revenue, then whatever works for you. You just have to look how you want to structure your rent schedule for the next 5 years. Annual rent increases that are based on CPI can make you feel more comfortable. They're more transparent. You know where that increase is coming from. But even with CPI, you're looking somewhere usually between 3 and 5%. So it's really just what's going to work for you and your business.
All right. Sounds good. Oh, rent structures. We already hit that. Sorry. Behind on the slides. All right, let's talk about percentage rent.
So percentage rent's the last kind of rent negotiation topic we're going to touch on today. It is often used in retail spaces and shopping malls where sales can vary significantly throughout the year. With percentage rent, tenants receive the benefit of negotiating a lower base rent in exchange for paying a percentage of their gross sales to the landlord. This can reduce fixed costs, which are a large part of operating expenses. Tenants can then reallocate resources to other areas of their business. This can be especially helpful for new businesses or those facing some economic challenges, since they pay less when sales are down. With percentage rent, landlords have a vested interest in the tenant's success because they receive extra income based on the tenant's sales performance. Leasecake recently rolled out a new percentage rent feature, which simplifies the process of calculating percentage rent based on lease terms and sales data, and allows clients to efficiently track and report on all percentage rent payments across their portfolio. This is something we can provide more information on after the webinar if anybody is interested in learning more about this feature. Now Heather's gonna kick it off on some renewal negotiation tips.
Thanks, Christy. Okay, if your business is thriving and you love your current location, especially industries like medtail and retail, where your familiarity is crucial. You have your customer base. Obviously, relocating isn't desirable. So strive to obtain multiple renewal options and maintain continuity for your customers. It's typical to see 2 or 3 5-year renewal options to extend the lease. As you probably know, deadlines to exercise your options are very important, and you don't want to miss them. So if you're required to give a 12-month notice prior to the expiration of your lease to exercise your renewal, you need to get out ahead of it, especially if you are considering relocating, because you want to look at the market and see what's out there, evaluate your business, evaluate locations out there, look at the space, look at requirements, what your efficiency is going to be. If you're going to start exploring market options, to ensure you have ample time to make your decision before it's time to give your notice to renew. The consequence of missing a renewal means several things. Of course, you can lose your space, go into holdover. Now you're paying double rent, and you're now at a disadvantage because time isn't on your side, and your landlord can increase the rent, and it can now be outside of those terms. So you definitely want to be sure to exercise your option on time. This is where I'm going to now plug Leasecake. I just want to say that Leasecake really helps with these renewal options. When you're required to give your landlord notice, which, by the way, make sure you're reading your notice clause in your lease, because you need to know if it's certified mail, FedEx, email, what's acceptable, and then make sure that your landlord's address is correct when you exercise that option. But again, you're required to give the landlord notice, and you're going to get a reminder from Leasecake 6 months prior to when you're supposed to exercise that option. So if you're required to give the landlord 9 months notice, Leasecake is going to send you a reminder 6 months in advance of that notice. So you will be well prepared to make a decision. So just had to give that plug. Addressing your lease renewal early is always a good idea. Just start the conversation. See, what the landlord's willing to do, and if it's already in the lease, it's okay. If you're paying $28 a square foot and you have a lease renewal for 5 years at annual escalations for 2%, now you know what your occupancy costs are, and you're going to be able to plan for your business knowing you have those fixed rents and what to expect. But if you're in a situation where you have your renewal options in your lease already set, you already know they're 2%, and you're going to renew, it's not too late to talk and find out what else you can do. And we're going to go over that in the next slide. But you may find, going back to rental rates, you may find that your landlord prefers to put then market rates for your renewal option. They may say fair market value or market rates, but no less than, say, 3%, to ensure that they're at least going to get a 3% increase in your rents. So of course, the problem is, if you're running a business, you don't know what the fair market value is going to be in 5 years. So it's more desirable to have set rent bumps. If you're going to agree and accept fair market value language, you might want to ask to put in there no more than, say, 5%, 4%, something like that. We can move on to,
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Back.
was
ahead.
gonna say, nobody wants to miss a renewal. And when you have 1 or 2 locations, you can manage it in your calendar, whatever. But once you get to 100 locations, there's way too many details in those leases to manage with your calendar reminders. So that's what a lot of our
Absolutely.
customers seem to be very excited about. Not
Yes.
having to think about it anymore. I think the term they use is peace of mind. They have peace of mind that I know I won't miss my lease renewal options. So good to know.
Going to get a notification. You're going to get an email. You're going to get a reminder.
Yep.
So again, it's best to have your renewal options set in your lease, but there are times where you've had things happen that were unpredictable. and maybe you want to stay in the space, but you need some help with TIs for your renewal, and it's not obviously in your renewal language. Um, so just ask. Again, our overall thing, just ask. You can go back, even though you signed your lease and it's got the renewal in there. You can still have a conversation with your landlord about your needs. Again, going back to that relationship, you can pick up the phone and call, even if it's going to be your property manager doing your renewal, just have that good relationship with them. And then you can call and say, hey, it looks like we're going to need some TIs. You can restructure and renegotiate your renewal at that point. I mean, that's what amendments are for, right? So landlords typically want to keep you in the space. As I mentioned before, costs money to turn over the space and have a vacant space and put it back on the market. Keep in mind though, again, landlords budget for their renewals. So they're going to already have an idea of what that is. They have it in your lease, so they know that they've put in 3% rent bumps for the next 5 years. And they may or may not add in to their budget some, if they know you haven't had any improvements in a while, they may put something in there. And if you've had those conversations during your initial term about some needs that may come up in your renewal, they're already going to be expecting it. And they may have already budgeted for you a little bit of, $3 a square foot, $5 a square foot, something like that for freshening up the space. So just keep that in mind, because don't go too outside the box, I guess, knowing that it's already budgeted, but it never hurts to just ask. I mean, if you want to ask for some, some help during your renewal, ask for that. All they can do is say no, and you'll never know if you don't ask.
Good life lesson.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right, requesting operating expense caps.
We're going to talk about some ways to negotiate regarding operating expenses, or CAM, which is an additional separate rent expense intended to cover any expenses involved with the day-to-day operations of the property. CAM expenses typically fall into one of two categories. They're either controllable charges, such as parking lot maintenance, landscaping, window washing, and anything else that the landlord has control over, and uncontrollable CAM charges, such as property taxes, building insurance, and other expenses that are outside of the landlord's control. CAM caps and leases can be cumulative or non-cumulative and calculated either year over base or year over year. A cumulative CAM cap, say that 3 times fast, creates a ceiling on annual increases for expenses that can be passed on to the tenant, allowing the landlord to recover any unused increases from prior years. Generally, landlords prefer cumulative CAM cap. I'm going to give an example. If a landlord and a tenant agree to a 5% cumulative cap and CAM expenses increase by 3% in year 2, the tenant's responsibility in year 3 would be capped at 7%, because this can include the 2% that was unused from year 2. A non-cumulative CAM cap prevents unexpected increases in CAM expenses, allowing tenants to more accurately budget their real estate expenses. Non-cumulative cap sets a ceiling on annual increases and does not allow the landlord to recover any unused increases from prior years. So an example of non-cumulative is if a landlord and a tenant agree to a 3% cap and the expenses are increased by 2% in year 1, then the tenant would pay the 2% increase. If the CAM expenses increase by 4% in year 2, then the tenant would only pay for the 3% increase that was negotiated in the lease. Operating expense caps continue to be one of the more complex terms landlords and tenants face in lease negotiations. So the next time you're negotiating the terms of your lease, you should carefully read the operating expense provision to make sure that the language matches your intended outcome. We recommend trying to negotiate for a fixed CAM, which is the next slide. Having a fixed CAM charge in your lease allows tenants to pay a flat fee to landlords each month for the upkeep of shared expenses. This fee is usually based on a dollar amount per square foot of the property and may increase annually to account for inflation. Fixed CAM agreements can be beneficial for both tenants and landlords in several ways, including they provide predictability to tenants so they can better manage their budgets and financial planning with consistent cost structures. Fixed CAM agreements can resolve debates and arguments about maintenance costs and who's responsible for paying for what. It can save time and money by eliminating lengthy negotiations and complex lease language. But even with the fixed CAM, it's important for tenants to still review the property expenses to ensure that they are not being charged higher than they feel that they should be. And the last topic for CAM charges is regarding audits. So tenants depend on their landlords for garbage collection, landscaping, snow removal. So they need to know that their landlord is paying fair market prices. Tenants often, but not always, have the right to audit their landlord's CAM calculations. A CAM audit is an opportunity as a tenant to review the common area maintenance charges and contest any that don't fall under your responsibilities according to your lease. It's important that you read your lease carefully and negotiate the right to audit the charges you pay. Without the language authorizing it, the landlord does not have to let you audit. Leasecake provides a comprehensive CAM reconciliation service and will soon be hosting an in-depth webinar to showcase this offering, I believe, in October. So already mark your calendar for that one. It's going to be a good one.
Yep, more to come on that. Everybody loves to talk about CAM reconciliations, so we will be diving into that. All right. Other points of negotiation?
Yes, so Christy and I see a lot of clauses in the leases, and sometimes we don't see them and we're like, oh, they should have asked for that. Should have asked for an exclusive use. But I'm sure we're going to start with tenant allowance, improvement allowance. I'm sure you're familiar with those, but this is an allowance that the landlord provides to cover a portion or the full cost of improvements to the space or your renovation. Securing an improvement allowance or negotiating for the landlord to cover renovation costs directly can save you a lot of upfront expenses, especially if you're just opening a new store. Allowances are usually stated in the lease as a lump sum or per square foot. They can vary depending on the property, depending on the length of your occupancy and your use and your square footage. So if you're in a smaller space, you might get $3 a square foot as opposed to a larger space. It's going to get much more. Landlords decide on allowances by considering the market, the client value, your use and your proposed renovations. And if they're going to be able to reuse those renovations. So as a side note, when you're moving in and you have a hood or an oven or a grease trap, check your lease. A lot of times those are going to be left with the space, especially if the landlords put money into that, helping you install those. Those are usually going to be in your alterations clause or something like that, that upon your move out, those are going to stay with the space. So check that, see if you're okay with it, or try to negotiate what you prefer. So allowances come, of course, with conditions to receive the allowance back, but there's specific improvement types and limitations on what the money can be spent on. And there's, of course, a deadline for you to get that money, and also, whatever the requirements are to turn into the landlord all your receipts and everything. So any unspent funds usually go back to the landlord. If your landlord isn't willing to provide a TI allowance, there's a couple things you can do. Don't be afraid to get creative and ask for some reduced rent to make up for the charges to grow the business and with their improvements, especially like at your renewal. For example, you could ask for half rent during months 1, 13, and 25. If they're not going to help you with that, and you really want to get some TIs done, you can also ask your landlord to finance your TIs and amortize them over the term of your lease at, of course, a reasonable interest rate. But I've seen that, and that's worked for some tenants. The next one is going to be a maintenance or repair. The number one maintenance obligation is HVAC units. So, and usually just what's serving the premises. Landlords may agree to take on some additional maintenance and repair responsibilities, which of course reduces the burden on the tenant, and ensures that, they're getting the quality of repair that they want. But if the landlord's asking you to take on the obligation of replacing the unit in your lease, first make sure to find out the age of the unit, and you can negotiate some help for that. You can ask for them to pay for half upon replacement, or that they're going to contribute, $1,500 to the cost of replacement. So just be sure to look at that in your maintenance clause. And then I kind of pointed on exclusive use. I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, but requesting exclusive use prevents the landlord from leasing space to a competitor. It benefits you. You don't have to worry about, someone opening up shop with the same use in the shopping center. And obviously that gives you more foot traffic to your door. Helps you capture your target audience and gives you some peace of mind. You can just kind of go about your business and not worry about if they're doing better than you down a couple doors down. And when you're getting that exclusive use language in the lease, make sure it's very clear. Don't leave room for interpretation. Make it specific to your use. We've seen some uses where it's, not real clear, and you probably could be interpreted differently if someone else was reading it. So just make sure it's specific to what you're selling, or what your use is. And then also specify your geographical area. So a lot of times the lease will say within the shopping center, landlord won't lease space to anyone else in the shopping center. But if the landlord owns another shopping center a mile or two away, you may ask for a radius that he's going to give you exclusive use, and won't lease space to a competitor within any other buildings that he owns in a radius of 2 miles, or whatever you think is reasonable. And that's pretty much, if you have any questions on exclusive use, just ask. But that kind of sums up that clause.
We had a question come in about tenant allowance, TI. What is customary TI square footage wise? Is there one?
I don't know that there is one.
Me,
I feel it's pretty broad.
it is. Is the question about what's kind of standard allowance per square foot?
I think so.
Depending on the size of the space. So yeah, it just depends. I've seen a lot between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet where it's, about $3 to $5 a square foot. Obviously that can add up in larger space too, but it really depends. And it depends on the use. I mean, if you've got Bass Pro Shops moving in, you're gonna give them you're gonna give them a big allowance.
Yeah.
$10 a square foot, $20 a square foot. If it's a bagel shop or something that's 1,200 square feet, it's probably going to be between 3 and 5.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. Some more points of negotiation. First, write a first offer.
Yep. So write a first offer clause gives the tenants a chance to lease a nearby space before anyone else. As Michelle mentioned, she's heard from tenants who had a great relationship with landlords that they offer the space to them first. But this clause, it ensures that if a landlord wants to lease a space next to a tenant's business, they must first offer to the tenant. This is important for tenants who expect to outgrow their current space during their lease term. So next we're going to talk about sublease clause, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen in your leases before, but allows a tenant to rent out part or all of their lease space to a third party. This arrangement can be temporary or permanent and offers a way to save money and adapt to changing space needs. Subleases usually come with some conditions, such as a landlord consent. Landlords want to know what tenants are going to be coming into their buildings. They want to have a say on who can come in and who cannot come in. And they will likely have to meet certain qualifications. Landlords want to know that they're financially stable and have a history of running a good business. It's important to keep in mind that when subleasing, the original tenant remains responsible for the rent and other obligations of the lease if the subtenant defaults on their commitments. An early termination clause can allow either the landlord or the tenant to end the lease before the agreed upon term under certain conditions. I'd say two of the most common tenant termination clauses we see are a notice termination, where a tenant can terminate the lease by giving the landlord a specified amount of notice time. This usually comes with a penalty fee. And the other early termination type is a sales-related termination, which allows a tenant to terminate the lease early if their gross revenue falls below a certain predetermined threshold. And the last kind of point of negotiation is co-tenancy. This can include minimum occupancy thresholds that trigger protections for tenants if the property's occupancy falls below a certain level. Minimum occupancy percentages can vary. They're often between 50 and 80%. So when occupancy drops below the threshold, the clause can provide tenants with rent reductions, the right to renegotiate lease terms, or even early termination. Co-tenancy clauses can be extremely beneficial for smaller retailers who rely on anchor tenants to attract customers. We're starting to see more co-tenancy clauses since the pandemic. This is becoming a lot more common in the commercial leases that we are seeing on a daily basis. So that concludes all of our negotiation topics for today.
All right. Thank you. We had a few questions come in that I was waiting to see if we were going to cover them. So I didn't answer them, ask them yet. All right. So someone is asking, there's a lot of different types of leases that we didn't talk about: gross lease, triple net, double net, single net. Is that important in what you ask or how you negotiate lease terms? And I know we have like lots of literature on this topic specifically, so this could be its own entire webinar topic. I don't know, but do you have an answer for that? A succinct one?
Do you want to, I don't want to take it, Christy, but
Go ahead, Heather.
Typically the landlord, you know what kind of building you're getting into. If it's an office space, it's going to probably be a gross, gross building, or the shopping center is triple net. So it just is what it is for all the other tenants already. So I haven't seen it as a negotiation point if it's a shopping center that has triple net, it's a triple net or CAMs in that retail center, that it's different for anyone else. It's just the whole center is triple net. So unless you've seen differently, Christy, I haven't seen it.
No, I don't think so. A lot of times you don't have the negotiation power to negotiation gross versus net. Like Heather said, it's going to be what it is predominantly for all of the other tenants in the building.
Okay. Good to know. And here's a question. I have never seen these terms before. So please explain the difference between ROFO or ROFO and ROFR. I don't know what those mean. Are we familiar with those terms?
We are. One of them has to do with more of like a purchasing option. So like if you're leasing a space, right of first refusal, is that correct, Heather? Is that one usually?
Yes.
One of them is usually purchasing. It can give you a clause if you're leasing like a pad site, it can give you the first right to purchase the building if the landlord wants to sell, or if they get another offer to buy the building, you may have the opportunity to counter. Like And then one of them has opportunities within a lease to take on space that might be next to yours. You have the first opportunity to do that. Heather, did I
Yeah,
miss anything?
sure. One is right of first offer, yes. And you might ask for that if you're anticipating expanding. So if the guy next to you moves out and you want you want to be the first offer that they give that space to, you have the right of first offer, and the landlord's going to come to you and say, you want to make an offer on this space. We're going to put it on the market. If they've put it on the market, right of first refusal, and they have gotten their, broker representing the landlord has gotten someone interested, and you have a right of first refusal, before they go forward with that proposal, they'll give you the opportunity to refuse the space, but there is a third party that is interested.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who was explaining to me what those acronyms meant in the Q&A. I appreciate it. Sorry, I didn't realize what they were. All right. What about not having a personal guarantee? Is that something that we should talk about in our lease negotiations?
So I'll talk to my experience, Christy, and then you can talk to yours. Most of the time, landlords will ask for a personal guarantee, and depending on your financials too, and when you're when you're applying for the space, they may put in a guarantee. A guarantee can help secure the deal, but for the most part, when you're getting into guarantees, it's good to ask for a release at some point. But whether the landlord makes a decision between you and another tenant based on a guarantee, I don't think that's, really comes into play too much. It's more just the security of making sure they're going to get the remaining liability of the rent.
All right, cool. Kevin is asking, do you have any creative early termination clauses you've seen? He's always trying to include one, but has limited success. Any advice?
Termination clauses. Yeah, I mean, you don't see those a lot in leases. The more common ones that I've seen, of course, are people that are closer to retirement, where it's death and disability, that they have the option to terminate should they become ill, something like that, and kind of gives them the security of not having to pay the liability left on the lease. But as far as early termination with no contingencies, just, it really would have to be, again, built on that relationship with the landlord, and them knowing your business and saying, we want to see how we're going to do here. I'd like to have the option, in the first couple of years to terminate. There's going to have to be some type of compensation for that space going back on the market. So I would imagine that the landlord would want to make up for that somehow in the rate. But I haven't seen a lot of success either with those without a contingent upon something else.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you for sharing all your insights. I wanted to give you all a heads up for our next 2 webinars that are coming up in case these topics are interesting to you. On the 7th of August, we've got Maximizing Profitability and Efficiency with Salem, the CEO of Serve Hospitality Group. They're a tropical smoothie cafe franchisee. And we're also going to be joined by Kevin from Restaurant 365. So we'll be talking about profitability and accounting. And then on the 20th, we have Dave's Hot Chicken. We'll be joined by the Chief Development Officer of Dave's, as well as the COO of Cluckin, which is one of their largest franchisees. They're going to talk about franchisor relationships And I'm sure you're all familiar with Dave's Hot Chicken. They have like 700 locations in their development pipeline in the matter of a few years. They're just exploding in growth. So it's a great growth story there. So join us for that. If we didn't get your questions answered right now, we will follow up with you. And thank you all for your participation. And Heather and Christy, thank you so much. I don't know if you have any closing words you'd like to leave everyone with other than just ask, which is the
Yeah.
theme. Don't be
Just
afraid to
ask.
ask.
Don't be afraid to ask. Yeah,
Ask.
that's our closing message.
I tell my kids the same thing, you know, it is a life lesson you need to know. If you don't ask for something, you won't get it. And it applies to lease negotiations same way. So,
Right.
all right, ladies. Well, thank you so much. And everyone,
you.
thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.